Mythicist Milwaukee is excited to announce its next major event, the Myth Information Conference 4. It will take place September 30th, 2017, so mark your calendars, and that will be in the Pabst Theater in Milwaukee. This event will include talks from Tom and Cecil from the Cognitive Dissonance podcast, YouTube personalities Armored Skeptic and Shoe on Head, and Melissa Chen from the Global Secular Humanist Movement. We will also hold a debate between Faisal Saeed Al-Muhtar and Azra Normani, moderated by Matt Dillahunty. The topic is yet to be determined, but you got to believe that it's going to have something to do with Islam. The night will conclude with the long-awaited premiere of the Batman and Jesus movie. We are treating this as a red carpet event. Special guests will include Richard Carrier, Arn Ra, Allie Jackson, No Illusions, Eli Bosnick, Seth Andrews, comedian Paul Provenza, and Bryce Blankenagel. Tickets are on sale now at mythicistmilwaukee.com. Buy your tickets early, please. This will help us. We really hope to see you there. This is going to be an awesome event. Welcome to the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. I'm your co-host, Brian. This is January 22nd, 2017. We've got a great guest for you today. Jake, why don't you tell us who that's going to be?
I'm going to go ahead and do that. Armin Navabi is a former Muslim from Iran and the founder of the Atheist Republic, a non-profit organization with over 1 million fans and followers worldwide that's dedicated to offering a safe community for atheists around the world to share their ideas and meet like-minded individuals. So that is who we have on today. He's great.
He is. He's also, atheistrepublic.com. He also has a book out.
Why There Is No God, Simple Responses to 20 Common Arguments for the Existence of God. Well, welcome to the show. We are very happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
We were discussing, some of the things we wanted to talk to you about today. I'm sure you've covered a few of them before, but we were hoping to dig a little deeper. And I guess we can just start right at the beginning.
Right. Tell us how your birth was.
Yeah, let's talk about your birth.
We're kidding.
No, it's a joke. So
I wish I could remember.
Are you sure about that?
Actually, my earliest memory, I think, is when I was 2 years old, which I've been told that's very rare because most people can't remember before age 4. But I remember telling my mom one time when I was in my teen years that I have this constant dream that she's holding me in her arms and we're in a balcony and she's pointing towards the city and telling me, Armin, look, fireworks. And she told me that's actually not a dream. That actually happened. You were 2 years old. It was fireworks, but it wasn't fireworks. It was Saddam's planes bombing Tehran. And I was just telling you it's fireworks so that you don't get afraid.
Wow. So that would have been like 1987 or so. So, yeah, at the later end of the Iran-Iraq war.
Yeah, I was born in 1983, so I think this was 1985 if I was 2.
Wow, yeah.
I think so.
That's incredible. So you're born in Iran. This is obviously post-revolution, so the Ayatollah Khomeini is kind of created the Islamic Republic. What do you remember? Were things changing? I mean, the Persians have a secular culture, it seems, but then it moves religious. Like, could you kind of bring us through your upbringing and how that worked? How much religion you were getting, how much schooling you were getting? What was that like?
Yeah, well, my parents were Muslim just by name. I mean, they would consider them, so I didn't ever see them do anything that was considered Islamic. They never prayed, they never fasted. Even some of the superstitious things that my mom used to do, Islamic, like she would buy me charms or stuff that was supposed to help me, and in Islam, those are considered witchcraft and punishable by death. So nothing that I witnessed that they do was considered Islamic. I became very religious not because of them, but because of my school. And when I did become very religious, it actually really annoyed them because I considered them not true Muslims. And I always tried to get them to pray and fast and take Islam very seriously because I remember when I was in school, I asked my religious teacher that my parents don't pray, but they're very good people. I told I told my religious teacher that, my father is a heart surgeon, and whenever he gets patients that can't afford to pay for the surgery, he just does surgery on them for free. And I said, but he doesn't pray. Is he still going to go to hell? And my religious teacher was like, yeah, he's going to go to hell. Wow. Unless you get him to start taking his religion seriously. So I was at home. I was this very annoying religious kid that I keep trying to get my parents to start praying, and I was very unsuccessful. And they just wish me to get just stop it and cut it out. And that's why actually when I did become atheist, they were very happy because they thought this is the end of it. I'm going to stop annoying them. But the problem was then they realized that now I'm actually very outspoken about my atheism, and that wasn't very safe in Iran. So that now they had this other thing they had to worry about.
Right, yeah, you can't get the room the right temperature. You're too hot, now it's too cold.
Yeah. So, especially my mom was always worried because in school I was very open to my friends and sometimes even to my teachers about my atheism. So,
wow.
Bit of me.
So you were kind of born to be an activist then, huh? It sounds like it.
Either on the Islamic side or the atheism. But honestly, even as an atheist, I kind of understand religious fundamentalists more than the moderates because as a kid, I always considered the idea of hell very terrifying. And I always wondered why nobody is thinking about this as much as I am, because everybody around me believed in hell, but nobody was worried about ending up there.
Right. To
me, that seemed like it should be everyone's priority to try to avoid going to hell if it's an actual real place, because, everybody was worried about their exams, about their career, about this party that they're having this weekend, if they're going to have the right outfit. But all of these people believed in hell, but none of them spent any time worrying about it. And I couldn't understand why nobody was worried about it, why everybody was pretty sure that they're not going to end up there.
Right. It's just simple math, right? It's just what is even 70, 80, 90 years of being alive compared to an eternity of suffering. So I can see why.
It's a wink.
It is,
time.
Yeah. It's nothing. It's compared to infinity. It's nothing. So I think that's a legitimate concern from that point of view. And I think it's telling how much can people really believe this if they're not constantly worrying about it.
Yeah, that's. If there is a God, then this world is basically meaningless. Like you have to spend every second and every day making sure that you are doing, the right things, and you're making sure that you're. You're making sure that you're avoiding going to hell. You're making sure you understand what this God exactly wants. That's why I kind of understand the fundamentalists more than I understand the moderates. At least they are consistent with their worldviews, with their ideology. And that's why even as an atheist, when I talk to fundamentalists, I can kind of relate with them more than when I talk to religious moderates. That even though I share more values with the moderates more, like we stand for the same thing, but I just find them completely inconsistent in their views. Not just in their views, but also how seriously they take it. Like, yes. Okay, but do you think, Islam or Christianity is consistent with, a lot of equality between genders, or has nothing against homosexuals? Even though if you believe in that, I still see moderates not spending most of their time to dedicate it to God, So it's not just about their views, it's about the level of dedication. There shouldn't be a single second of your waking hour that you dedicate to anything other than making sure that you're right with God, I think.
And there's a lot of fundamentalists. You're right that I kind of feel the same way. Like you're on fire, and there's two ways to go: atheism or fundamentalism. And I've poured through on Google pages and pages of different Islamic sites that have an imam or some kind of scholar. And everyone's asking, what's the ruling on this? What's the ruling on that? I own a business. Sometimes the dogs sneak in the back door and lick the plates. What do I have to do? And you'll hear, no, you've got to wash it 5 times or 6 times, and once with sand. And and people care about this, and I was amazed. Pages and pages, and these are smart people. You can tell by like their sentence structure. That's living it.
Yes, exactly. And you're told, actually, one thing that it makes it a little bit easier for these people is that you're told if you're actually actively looking for the answer on how to do it right, even if you get it wrong, as long as you did all your best to make sure you get the right answer, you're okay. So a lot of these people think like, okay, so I asked this imam and that imam and checked this scholar. I did everything I could do to get the right answer, what's right. And even if these scholars were wrong, I'm still good with God because God could see that I was actively looking for the right way to do it.
I've seen some where they said, I follow the Shafi Madhab and I have to do it this way. And the scholar says, but you can just be Maliki and they have a little faster, better way to do it. And okay. To me, that just seems so odd that you can pick and choose even within fundamentalism and that like through your different like jurisprudences.
Yeah, actually, you are allowed to pick and choose, and as long as you're not picking and choosing based on which one is the easiest. That's what I was told.
Really?
Huh.
So okay, that
you're not picking and you're picking and choosing based on logic and not based on which one is the most convenient. Then you're okay.
Ah, okay. So there's some wiggle room. Now, getting back to Iran, were these the state schools that you were in, like your primary education? You had a religion class, or were you obligated to go to the madrasa?
No, this is actually a much more liberal school than a lot of other schools that you go to. But even within every school has some mandatory classes, right? So you have your physics, you have your math, you have your English classes, you have your Arabic classes. And you have to have Arabic classes because Quran is written in Arabic. Yes. And even though, Arabic is like, we speak Farsi, we have to still, it's mandatory to learn some Arabic. Those classes, those teachers had an influence on me, and it didn't have the same influence on most of my classmates. I remember, my parents were a little bit more well-off than my other classmates, and I remember a lot of my classmates considering me, I don't know why, but they a lot of times they made fun of me. They called me like oh, you're a Western, just because my clothes were a little bit different and stuff. But one time I remember in class, I asked a question, and I don't know what the question was, but a lot of my classmates made fun of me. They brought it up that, oh, you're American puppet or something like that. And then this was in the religion class, and the teacher said, you're telling this about Armin, but he's the only one in this class that always shows up for the noon prayers in the school's mosque. And I remember feeling so proud and I felt so good, that feeling that you're like the teacher recognized that.
End of belonging,
I'm right? God, that I'm better than everybody in this class because I do actually show up to the noon prayers. Because most of the people in my class didn't pray, They even if they did pray or fast, it was just during their Ramadan. They just 1 month they become religious, and then they forget about it after Ramadan.
But it's Friday prayers that's the big one, right? So did people was there any state pressure for people to go to Friday prayers? No,
and they wouldn't even pray at home. Like these are most of the people I knew. This is, by the way, this is not representative of most of the country. This is, a lot of liberals in Iran, they live in their own social bubble.
Yeah.
And they think the rest of the country is like that. That's why when you meet Iranians in the West and you tell them, they try to convince you that Iran is not very religious. But most of the Iranians that end up in the West, they live in a very, their own social bubbles, and they don't really know about, like, when I tell Iranians here in the West that actually more than 85% of Iranians are very religious based on research, they don't believe me. They're like, that's not my experience. They're like, well, your experience doesn't really reflect how the rest of the country is.
Fair enough.
People in Upper Tehran have a completely different experience of Iran than people in Qom or Mashhad.
Yeah. And
or even southern Tehran.
Were you in Tehran then? Or because Qom is like that's the holy city.
Yes. Yeah. Qom is I actually one time I went from Tehran to Qom with some of my friends. We just drove there. I don't know why. We just felt like just driving from one city to another. We had too much time on our hand, I guess. But we felt like we basically went into another planet. Like it was completely different. I couldn't find a single woman that wasn't in full like hijab, like not the Tehrani kind of hijab where they put the hijab like halfway down there. It's basically not even a head covering anymore. It looks like a scarf based on how most of their hair is showing. Like, but when you go to Qom, they're wearing the chador, which is the whole black full covering, and I couldn't believe how different it was. Like the entire. So imagine in Qom, everybody is in full chador, which is the black, full covering of the hijab. But in Tehran, I remember my mom when I was still in Canada, my mom told me that she went to the bank. This is Upper Tehran, and there was this chador woman, which means a woman in full hijab, and she was trying to talk to the teller, and she was being ignored by all the tellers, and then nobody would answer her, and she kept on saying, excuse me, sir, and nobody would answer her. And eventually my mom took her hand and went to the teller and said to the teller, can you please see what she wants? And the guy was so rude to him, and eventually they did what she wanted, and she left. And my mom asked him, why are you being so rude to this woman? All the tellers are like, oh, these religious people, they ruined our country. And this is the experience you get in Upper Tehran, when you could actually not get served because you look very religious. People there were actually discriminating against somebody because she looked too religious.
Wow.
Right? But the thing is that this experience does not reflect what most of the country is like. So people that live in this area, they might think that what they will tell you here, they're like, oh, in Iran, the religious people are just this crazy minority that they have control over the country. But it's not actually like that. Even the opposition to the government in Iran is mostly religious. But a lot of liberal people there think that if you're anti-government, you must be liberal or you must be anti-religious, right?
How old were you when you first when you first finally got out of the bubble and saw, because you said you were driving, right? Or you were driving with your friends. How old were you when that first happened?
Well, actually, even before that, when I went to university, because before that I used to go just to private school. When in high school, I was just private school, so I always used to hang around more liberal kids. But then when I got into university, I went to do public university in Tehran, and there I started meeting a lot of people from all over the country, right? And that's when I saw the different kind of, the different experience.
So that was after that was after you started questioning things then, right?
Well, that's after the kind of your dramatic event. I think you were 12 or 13.
Right.
Yes. Actually, okay. So that happened when I was still in high school, and I was still in Shia Islam, or at least what they taught us in school in Tehran. This was actually in Shiraz, was that it's not like Christianity. In Christianity, you're born with sin. So from the very beginning, you have sin, right? The original sin.
Yep.
In Islam, it's not like that. In Islam, you're pure, you're sinless, you're what they call ma'soom. For boys, it's before age 15, you have no records of sin. And for girls, it's before age 9.
Bad deal.
Before age 9, you have no record of sins. Your sins only start piling up after age 15 for boys, right? So that basically means that if you die before age 15, you're only going to end up in heaven. There's nowhere else because you couldn't have possibly sinned, right?
No, free trip.
For me, that seemed like a loophole, right? I was still obsessed with trying to avoid going to hell. But then I thought, well, suicide is a sin. But they told us it's an unforgivable sin. But again, if you do it before age 15, that's not a sin, right?
And none of it counts then.
Before age 15.
Right.
Yeah. So I basically, I wanted to make sure I'm getting this right. So I asked my Islamic teachers as well. I was like, wait, so if I commit suicide before age 15, I'll go to heaven and I could avoid going to hell. And they were like, yes, but why would you? Their answer for why not, the only excuse they had for not doing it was that the heaven that you would be getting is a much lower version of heaven that you could actually achieve by actually doing good and being a good Muslim.
So they have like a tier list?
Different layers of heaven, and you're going to get one of the lower ones.
So you wouldn't get any houris, right? I mean, it's crazy. I mean,
so you would get premium heaven, like if you didn't do that. But then if you did, that's like heaven light. It's like
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, the most premium heaven is the heaven you get from martyrdom, right? And that's where Muhammad is apparently, right? So that's the best part of heaven is reserved for people that die in war against enemies of Allah, right? I would get the lowest version of heaven if I just died before even having a chance to prove my worth, right? But the thing is, I didn't really care. I was like, you know what? As long as I don't end up in hell, I'm good. Because why would I risk it? This is seems like a huge gamble, right? To make. I'm getting greedy for a higher level of heaven. I'm risking actually ending up in hell. And I was like, this is the worst gamble anybody could play. Why would I risk at all? Even if there's the slightest chance that I'm going to end up in hell, I want to make sure that I remove that chance, right?
Yeah, I'm with you.
So basically, I just jumped out of the window of my high school building.
How high was that? Like, how was it? What floor were you on?
Well, it wasn't high enough, apparently. So I didn't know it takes. I think it was the third floor.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty high.
Ouch.
Yeah, and I landed on concrete floor, but I broke my left hand, my both legs. I fractured my back. I almost got paralyzed, and I was in a wheelchair for 7 months. I missed 1 year of school, and the only reason I didn't try it again is because I saw what it did to my parents. Like, I saw my dad cry for the first time. I saw my mom collapse when she saw me in the hospital. It was really bad. My dad was actually in the middle of the surgery when they told him about it. That was a bad caller. You should never tell a person something like that when they're in the middle of surgery. That's the only reason why I didn't try it, because I saw how I was being selfish. I didn't think about what this would do to them.
Right.
But then when I reached 15, I was like, damn it, now I have to play this game.
Yes.
Now I have to make sure I get everything right, not miss a single prayer, do the full Islam thing.
So did they question? You had to tell them your motivation for doing this, right? And
no, actually I didn't. I said it was an accident. They didn't believe me. The main reason why they didn't believe me is because I took out my watch and gave it to one of my friends before I did it. So they felt but they didn't tell me that my friend told them that for a very long time. So they
So they knew.
So what they ended up doing was they took me to shrinks and so many other people because they thought I was depressed, right? Well, I didn't tell them why I did it, right? But I wasn't depressed. They thought I was depressed, and the treatments that they tried to force on me actually did eventually make me pretty depressed. And, that 1 year of missing school made me, and all these shrinks coming and asking me questions and me trying to hide the fact that I did this on purpose, made me so isolated that, and the fact that I was going to take Islam seriously, it worked very well together because I kind of saw God as my only refuge at that point. I had no more friends. I was hiding. I was keeping secrets from my parents. And basically God became the only person that I really shared, my thoughts with and I talked to. So he was basically my best friend, not just my creator. And I basically felt like my bond with him was getting stronger and stronger. The more isolated I was getting from my friends. So when I eventually ended up going back to school, my classmates were completely different because I missed a whole year, right? And I didn't know anybody, and I was basically this loner that focused on praying and Islam and studying Islam and making sure everything is right. By the way, that's the whole reason why I became an atheist, because I started studying it. If I didn't become religious, I wouldn't have become an atheist.
Right.
Looking at Islam and studying it eventually made me start doubting it because it started making less and less sense the more I thought about it.
It probably helped that you were alone too, for you to actually have to actually question things and then not have that be shut down. Because I think a lot of the fundamentalists get trapped in a community where they're surrounded by everybody that will support them in believing in these fundamentalist ideas. I mean, you see it all the time.
Yeah.
We had a Mormon on, or he was a Mormon no, it wasn't a Mormon, was it? No, Jehovah's Witness, I'm sorry, where what was it, the boiling pot with the frog? Do you remember what I'm talking about? How you get into this really deep into this thing, and then everybody around you is telling you it's real, and by the time you get to the stuff that you would have questioned, you're already in too deep, and you already have too many people surrounding you that are supporting the same thing, and you have too much to lose now. But if you're alone, and it's just you and God, that's kind of the ideal situation to question things, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe. Well, I wasn't surrounded. Yeah, I wasn't in a. I was basically very alone with my religious thoughts because I was in a school where most kids didn't think like that, and my family made fun of me. My cousins made fun of me for being religious. My classmates were mostly liberal, so they didn't. I started growing a beard, and they felt like, oh, this scary Bessie. Like they call me a Basiji, which I wasn't, but they basically like Basiji means like religious police.
Yes.
Like they kind of like, oh, my brother Basiji. Like basically they kept making fun of me for being religious. So I wasn't at all in a community of people that supported my fundamentalism at all. But I kept at it. I said I don't need these people. I have my God. My God supports me.
So what was the big turning point then from there? Like, when did you really start to question? Like, was there a certain rule you found or something that when you were studying, you read something and thought, like, this is ridiculous? Like, where was the turning point? Do you remember the moment?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so basically I started studying other... One thing that I could never understand was why would God send my parents and everybody that is not a Muslim to hell forever? So I started studying other religions, and basically I went to my school library and I picked a book called The History of Religion. And when I started reading it, it wasn't at all what I thought it would be. It started from the very beginning, right, of how religion started, and it started like talking about the first signs of religion, like in cavemen and stuff. And then it went to like Egypt and the Jews, and even before that, like the polytheism. And when I was reading the history of it, like, it seemed like polytheism used to be the norm. But I thought like Islam was because okay, so a lot of people think Islam, according to Muslims, Islam started with Muhammad, but that's not what you learn in Islam. Islam started with Adam, right? So they think Muhammad just came and completed the lesson, but Jesus was teaching Islam, Abraham was teaching Islam, Moses was teaching Islam. The religion was always Islam, right? And then
often the Jews, right, they kind of screwed up the message, and that's why they needed more messengers.
Exactly. So they screwed up the message, but the message was always Islam, even before Muhammad. Yes. That's what you learn. But when I started studying history of religion, it seemed like there was no sign of monotheism for a very, very long time, right? And I kept on seeing how the politics and the religions worked with each other in Egypt and in other places, and how useful it was. Like I learned about the Hammurabi, right? And how these laws were made up. And so it kept looking like it was possible that this is all just made up.
Yeah.
And the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I saw that they copied each other. And, in Iran, they actually do teach you evolution and the Big Bang Theory and all that. Like, they don't have any problems with that. They think that... I actually didn't even know that a lot of Muslims don't believe in evolution until I came to Canada. Because in Iran, evolution is accepted as science, as fact, right?
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah.
That's surprising.
Yeah.
It's funny that how you see fundamentalist Muslim communities in first world nations that... They're usually not first generation, but second generation that are more fundamentalist than the countries of their origin, which their predecessors come from. I find that fascinating.
Actually, I think it depends on the country. I think maybe in South, I don't know, maybe in some other countries, maybe in they don't believe. I mean, even among Christians, like Catholics don't have a problem with evolution, right?
Correct. No, ever since 95,
it's mostly
you were allowed to believe it.
It's mostly Protestants that have a problem with evolution, but in Iran, it's basically considered, it's considered scientific fact. But the problem is when they started teaching evolution in school, and they also start teaching us theories of where the first cells came from, the primordial soup and everything.
Yeah.
And this all could be, even if we don't know the explanation, there might be an explanation for everything, right? Even if I don't know the explanation. So the history of religion alongside the things that we were being taught in school made me think this could all be made up. Eventually, I started thinking this is all made up. And then I started asking myself, when did I even assume that there is a God? At what point did I just accept that? And based on what? Right? And then I started praying to God, and God, the more I think about you, the less you're making sense to me. If you're real, please help me, because if I keep going down this path, I'm gonna lose faith in you, and I don't want to end up in hell. And sometimes I was crying that I was losing my faith. I was like, "You're the only one I have. Please don't leave me." So I was praying, I was crying, but eventually I lost complete faith in him. One time I actually told two of my friends in university, and I told them about my views, and they were shocked. But after around a week or two, they were also atheists. So,
wow.
Yeah, and then I thought, okay, the only two people I talked to about this, now they're atheists, so I'm not crazy.
So is that kind of how that began then for the Atheist Republic? Was that kind of how, was that the beginning?
Because then I started, I first didn't start Atheist Republic. I first went and started this group on Orkut. This is before Facebook. This was a social media made by Google before Facebook existed. So I went on Orkut and I made this group called Persian Atheists.
Right.
And then I saw so many people joined. And people were joining, and then they're like, "Oh my God, you're an atheist too!" And they couldn't believe that there's some. I mean, it grew so fast, and we couldn't believe that there were so many of us out there. We thought, I thought I was. When I actually became an atheist, I was the only atheist I knew. I didn't even know the term atheist, right? But then when I figured out that there are people out there that think like me, because I thought I was like an oddball, right? But then I created this group, and a lot of people joined, and every time, most of the time when people joined, they were in complete shock that there are other atheists in Iran out there. And we were so happy to find each other. We're so happy to validate that we're not crazy. And I thought, this must be a global thing. It can't be just us. There must be other atheists everywhere, and they all must think they're kind of, alone. So I basically at that point started Atheist Republic. And even to this day, even till now, even with social media and all this, people being able to connect with each other, I still see atheists joining Atheist Republic and, still being surprised about how many atheists are out there. An atheist from Philippines joins and hey, I'm a Filipino atheist. And then somebody comments, me too, I'm from Philippines, I'm atheist too. And then they get 50 comments a guy wow, I didn't know there were so many Filipino atheists. And it's such a great feeling to show people that there are actually a lot more people, even within their city or even within their own village, that are atheists than they originally thought.
Right. I find it amazing that you've gotten out there, and so you initially put it out because, wow, I'm not alone. But then did at some point, or did you keep pushing the atheistrepublic.com because you were worried about kind of political consequences of religious belief?
The main reason was mostly just building the community, not to change anyone's views or to push any kind of agenda or anything. But the thing is that I called it the Republic because I didn't want to set what we do and what we are for. I wanted to let the community always decide what we're going to do. So that's why I called it the Republic. Yeah. So whatever it turned into was not by design, was based on where the members wanted to take this going. So I was always just focusing on building a community and showing people that there's a lot of other atheists out there. And I never wanted to actually have a set agenda, because I always thought that it was very obvious that we didn't agree in much other than the fact that there is no God. So I didn't think it's appropriate for us to come up with a set agenda because we all disagree. And I always wanted to highlight that disagreement, because I thought it was a great thing that we disagree, because it was a way to avoid tribalism.
It's a good point.
And also that disagreement always kept us reevaluating everything else that we believed in. So that was a great thing. I never wanted to try to make us seem like, we all in this, we're all united. No, we're not united. We're very divided, and I was like, that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. Let's keep it divided. So let's keep checking, criticizing each other and checking each other's views. Because if we were all wrong about this whole God thing that my entire life was based on, then that's a good, hint that there might be many other views that we hold, that we strongly hold, that we are wrong about, right? So let's not just stop there. Let's just reevaluate everything at all times.
I got to tell you, I love that philosophy. I think that's the right way to go. More people need to think that way. All right, we're just going to cut away real quick. We're going to go to our myth of the day. Go ahead. You can go ahead and do the myth of the day, Antonio.
Thank you. Like all the Abrahamic faiths, Islam's foundations have been influenced by religions that existed prior to its existence. Modern-day Islam was heavily influenced by the ancient Arabian mythological moon worship religions. This is just another example of the ancient pagan tradition that is still practiced by the faithful today. For example, pre-Islamic pagan worship of the mythical goddess Al-Ilat was worshipped at Mecca. Today, modern-day Islamic worship of the god Allah is worshipped at Mecca. And that is our myth of the day.
Bam, myth of the day is done. And we're back. That was the myth of the day. Holy moly. Wow, what a great myth.
Do you feel like, you've mentioned before, like there's two pieces going on, like there's a ex-Muslim movement, and I think that's what you're part of. Do you look at the religion, talk to those that have left and have that conversation? There's also a Muslim reform movement going on. And I think you indicated that in the Middle East, or at least outside of America, that the ex-Muslim movement has actually got more traction than reform. Could you talk more about that?
Well, I think the numbers are, in here in the West, because I think it's because a little bit not so PC to tell people to leave their religion. So I think a more PC version of it is to tell people that, hey, just here's a more moderate, more Western approved, more liberal version of your religion. Can you just pick this one? And also to kind of sell it as if that was always the true nature of this religion, right? Mm-hmm. So to say like this was actually, and also sometimes people think that this is actually what most Muslims believe in. This reform movement that we see in the West is actually very un-Islamic and it's as fringe as the terrorists and jihadists are. Yeah, so. If as mothers try to keep pointing out, so yeah, Islamic fundamentalism is common, but maybe Islamic terrorism is a fringe group, yes. Right? Even though there might be a lot of support for it, right? And they keep pointing that out, but they should also point out that their reform movement is even more of a fringe movement than those terrorists, and they keep highlighting it as if this is the de facto Islam, but they are hated by most Muslims. Their version of Islam, if you read their beliefs, and who was that guy? I forgot his name. Okay, so actually the book that I was reading was No God But God, and I think Reza Aslan,
that's Reza Aslan,
at the beginning of it, he was mentioning that a lot of the Quran is just stories and not necessarily true. And I was reading that like, okay, this is so not Islamic. Like any Muslim reading this would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Wait, can I say that on this podcast?
We swear all the time. Okay.
Because even the most moderate Muslim, most liberal Muslims that I've met, they never think that anything in the Quran is not 100% true. I mean, this is the direct word of God.
Like, the last and final revelation.
I think Reza Aslan is a Sufi, and Sufism is considered so on. Like, if one
Yes.
thing unites Shias and Sunnis together is the fact that Sufism or Ismaili Islam or Baha'i, these are really not Islam, right?
Right.
I'm talking about Sunni and Shia religious people. This is what they all agree on. And anything you read by Reza Aslan or even some more honest reformists, like Majid Nawaz, like, I love the guy, right? Majid Nawaz is a great person, right? And he is fighting for many of the things that we're fighting for. He's fighting for secularism.
Yes.
He's fighting for
Tolerance of other religions, pluralism.
Yes, he believes in gay rights. He believes in all the values that many of us believe in. But he's hated by most Muslims. Like, his views are. I mean, I think he would acknowledge that, right?
Yes.
The pushback he's getting from the Islamic community is much, much greater than he would get from us or even the even the Islamophobes are not fighting against him as much as anybody that tries to sell these views. I mean, the good thing is that Majid Nawaz is honest about it. He does agree. I think he would agree that his views are very rare within the Islamic community, at least in the most Islamic countries, right? So the views of Muslims in the United States might not really represent what most Muslims believe out there. But what Majid Nawaz will tell you is that maybe he's just trying to change that. The thing is that if you're trying to change that is this a new Islam, or is this actually what Islam was originally intended to be?
Yeah, now you're getting into the can of worms.
Exactly, because a lot of these reformist movements, as the fundamentalists point out, is that these views are really new. For thousands of years, for 1,400 years, none of these ideas were considered Islamic, and none of these interpretations were considered Islamic. But all of a sudden, when this modern Western morality comes in, now we're trying to, adhere to that. All of a sudden, we're like, oh, maybe this interpretation was always wrong. Maybe this doesn't mean that you could hit your wife. Maybe Zaraba is translated wrong. For 1,400 years, people translated it wrong. Even the Arabic scholars and all these Islamic scholars, they all got it wrong. But now, all of a sudden, when we're trying to make this religion more acceptable, all of a sudden we're saying that, okay, maybe it was translated wrong. But, I mean, the thing is that, but Majid might point out, like, okay, so you are actually want to be in the same side of the fundamentalists? Are you defending their position? He might say, like, why would you take their side in this? But that's the problem. The problem is that their arguments makes more sense than the reform. We have to acknowledge that the fundamentalist arguments for their interpretations makes more sense. And I'm not saying, that's a bad thing, because the reform movement doesn't have the logical arguments on their side. The only way to resolve this is by pointing out that the whole Islam thing doesn't make any sense, because you can't treat fundamentalists as idiots. Okay, these are people that have studied Islam inside and out.
Yes.
For thousands of years. They know their religion. You can't just walk in here and be like, hey, maybe you got it this wrong. For the sake of being nicer, let's just interpret it this way. And they will point out the hadith that will support their views. They will point out all the translations of the same word in similar context that will support their views. And the fact that they are making more sense makes this whole reform movement very difficult. The fact that if I'm saying the fundamentalist argument makes more sense is not a support of their views. It's not a support of their values, because their premises are incorrect, which is this whole existence of God and Muhammad as his prophet. even if their arguments are more logical, they eventually come to the wrong conclusion, because with the wrong premise and a logical argument, you're going to end up most likely into a wrong conclusion. So it doesn't matter how logical you're being with your analysis, because your premise is wrong. So instead of trying to fix a wrong premise with another faulty argument to get into a correct value, it's better to just target the premise. I think what people are hoping here is like they say, oh, well, these people are idiots anyways, so let's try to come up with some faulty arguments to at least adhere our values. As it doesn't matter that they're using wrong logic to come to our values, as long as they get to our values. But that will never work, because you're really, if you have a wrong premise, you could come up with so many different random conclusions. For you to hope that for you to introduce an argument for them to land on the same values as you are, and that's wishful thinking.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you're gonna come to
really
you're always gonna. Yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. Like you're always gonna be wrong in the long run. It might suit your social needs now, but down the road when things change again, then you'll have to go back to that same faulty premise, continue to build upon it. That's no way to tackle it.
It's a decent place to land. I know Majid. I agree. I really like him. Although I guess I would put Reza Aslan not necessarily in the reformer club, but into the. He seems to be, to me, I question his motives. That he seems an apologist for Islam, and he's appealing to some of the elements, the illiberal elements in the West that say don't criticize it. So that I just have a lot of issues.
I would never offend Majid Nawaz enough to put him as the same category as Reza.
Right.
No, that's fair. Yeah. And I suspected that you do that too. I wanted to ask, like, current events wise, to flip forward.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on, like, specifically like Turkey or Indonesia? These are countries that have secular constitutions, but both seem to be regressing backwards in some ways, probably in different ways. I mean, what can you speak to there, like, for our listeners?
This goes back to this whole argument that even as long as you have religion, the belief system is dangerous, right? You can't just hope that people will eventually come to the right conclusion, because religion is useful. Mm-hmm. So even if it's not being used for a while, at some point, if a lot of people in your country believe in it, somebody is going to come and take advantage of it for their political needs, right?
Yes.
So that's why I always believe in the bottom-up kind of activism rather than the top-down political activism, because you have to change people's views for the top-down political activism to work. If you can't get people's views to change, you can't take a shortcut and just try to change policies, because if those beliefs are there, eventually somebody is going to come see, okay, this is a very useful tool that I could use for my agenda.
So you think that's more of a bottom-up movement in both of these countries?
The thing is that the belief is already there for these people to take advantage of. I'm saying if you want to go change politics, you first have to change people's views. Right. You have to first create enough movement on the ground for people's ideas, for people's views to be enough for any kind of political movement to be able to utilize that, right?
Right, because and so the opposite can't take root.
Yeah.
But has that been changing? Like, it seems to me that Islamic fundamentalism with Saudi Arabia's exporting of a lot of Wahhabism, that it's having some influence that's being picked up more in Turkey, and that the average person in Turkey and the average person in Indonesia is more conservative than they once were, say, 20 years ago. And that's the reason. Is that, would you agree with that? Or, like, am I lacking nuance?
Yeah, I mean, well, actually, Saudi Arabia might have started it, but now it has taken a life on its own. I mean, you think secularism is growing online. It's nothing compared to what these Islamic Facebook pages and social media, like, they are really good at it. They say this is the age of information, but it's also the age of misinformation. They are spreading so fast on the internet and on social media. And I think it's not, I mean, Saudi Arabia tried to compete with Iran because they saw that Iran was spreading their Shia ideology, and they were their tentacles were growing all over the Middle East, and they're very successful at it. They had this centralized authority, and everybody saw Khomeini and now Khamenei as their religious leader.
Yeah.
So they started doing that themselves with their version, but now that whole thing that they spread is basically growing on its own without their involvement. Iran was much more successful at keeping it centralized, keeping Khomeini and Khamenei as this holy figure that people admire and they would even die for.
Wow. Okay. So the Khomeini's version is having an animal control, and Saudi Arabia just released a bunch of brown snakes everywhere, and you can't.
Yeah.
Okay, and they've kind of gotten out of control.
So we're kind of running a little bit low on time, but I wanted to get to talking about your book. I think that's a fair thing for us to talk about, of course.
It is in 2014, if I'm correct.
Yep. That's what I got, too. Why There Is No God, Simple Responses to 20 Common Arguments for the Existence of God.
And I promised a lot of my readers in that book that I'm going to write a book on Islam and one on Christianity. And I know that has been taking me a long time, but I promised them to write it, and I will write one. I'm working on the one on Islam right now, and it will come out, I promise. So sorry to all the people that have been waiting patiently. I will get it out.
I don't think you have to apologize for that. I mean, you can. I'm not going to stop you. You just did. But books take a long time to write.
But he promised. So
I know he promised.
That's
but
good.
He didn't say a due date.
He's on
right?
record.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. But it takes a while. I mean, I'm writing a few books myself, and it's a process,
And I
especially for you.
People will be interested in that.
And having to nonfiction for me, I feel like is even harder than fiction because you have to verify everything, and you know what I mean.
Can I also say something with regards to the book that you mentioned, Why There Is No God? I also want to say, if you are listening to this, and if you are in a country that doesn't have access to Amazon, or if you don't have access, if you don't have a credit card, or if you can't afford to buy a book, just come to atheistrepublic.com, let us know, and we'll send you a free PDF copy of it.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Which you can store on your phone and less likely to get caught with it in certain countries.
Yeah.
So that's great. I wanted to fire out another current event. I mean, obviously everybody, if you've been on Facebook at all, is talking about the election, and some people are very worried. Some people are overzealous with joy. The Muslim community, from what I looked at the Pew polls, Trump surprisingly got 3 times as many Muslims as Romney. What do you make of that? And what do you make of people like Osner Nomani, who admitted that she voted for Trump, getting called a native informant? I mean, do you have any thoughts on the current political situation as it regards to talk about Islam?
What I do think is a lot of Muslims in the West don't like Muslims. Like Muslims in the United States don't like Muslims outside of the United States, and vice versa. I've seen a lot of commentary from Muslims in Middle Eastern country that they think that the Muslims in the United States, most of them are hypocrites that have this quote unquote Western approved version of Islam rather than the true Islam. And a lot of Muslims in the United States think that, the Muslims outside of the United States are a little bit too extreme. And if they do come to the United States, they're going to embarrass them and ruin their reputation. And they think if they come into the United States and cause trouble or do some attacks or something, they're going to get grouped in with them. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is based on what I've seen, which is not statistically scientific.
Sure.
Right? So, or accurate. So I don't know if this is what's causing it. But this is just based on what I'm seeing online and based on the commentary. So I do think that there are a lot of Muslims here in Canada and also in the United States that would like it if you stop letting more Muslims come. They want Muslims in the United States to be just basically Muslims that are born there from Muslim families with their own moderate version of Islam rather than letting other people come.
It seems sensible.
Ruin it for them.
Yeah, it seems sensible since we don't owe citizens the same right, or we owe citizens more rights than we owe non-citizens, that you could just screen for ideology, screen for people that are pro-Western, the atheist Muslims, ex-Muslims, apostate Muslims. I think would love it here, and they're very much in danger in many countries. It seems like we should. Those are the folks that I think if you're going to fast track anyone, fast track them, and but vet to make sure that people aren't harboring anti-West ideologies. That's what seems like the sensible solution to me. Do you think this one, I think, is going to come up early in the Trump administration, the Muslim Brotherhood being designated a terrorist group, and there's going to be a lot of things on both sides. Do you have an opinion on that?
In regards to what exactly? Like
whether the U.S. should designate, like the UAE and I think 6 other countries, including Egypt, have the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. So should the United States follow suit?
I mean, well, they are. So
certainly they're an Islamist that I don't like their ideology.
The thing is that I do think that there's a lot of people in the West only care about Islamic terrorism when it starts coming to the West. But the thing is that Islamic terrorism is mostly killing Muslims,
True.
Right?
Yes.
And it's happening whether it comes to the West or not. And for people to only care about it if it happens in the United States, I think it's a little bit sad. You know, I mean, not that many people have died from Islamic terrorism in the U.S. More people die from car accidents.
It's true.
And other things. But the thing is, that doesn't mean Islamic terrorism is not an issue. It is an issue, but it is an issue more in Egypt right now, or in Iraq, or in Syria, right? So, and the thing is that our fellow human beings are dying, and we should care about them, whether they're Muslim or not, and and whether it's happening here in Canada or in the United States or not. I do think that, a lot of people focus too much on their own country, and I think we're all in this together. I mean, I consider myself a citizen of Earth. Geographical distances, I think, shouldn't determine whether we care about other people or not.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we live in a world of bubbles, which I know you talked about earlier, and it's definitely, we're at a point where we need to start breaking them.
Yeah. And you can't fight, you can eliminate a jihadist group, but without eliminating the ideology, some other jihadist group will eventually form and take its place.
Yeah, exactly, because borders don't stop ideas, right?
Right.
Because even if you can stop people coming in the United States, the ideas will come here, and you can't, and those ideas could basically create the very monsters that you are afraid of without anybody crossing the border.
Yeah, you bet.
And the only way to fight those ideas is by crossing these walls rather than making new walls. You have to actually, instead of waiting for them to come here and trying to change their ideas, I think we should just go there. We should, the best defense is an offense, and I don't mean that in a attack, in a kind of war kind of sense, but I do think this is a war of ideas, and we're currently losing. A lot of people here in the West feel like we're winning until recently, but Islam is growing, both in the total number as a percentage. And if you see what they're doing online, even online on social media, they're way more active than our secular groups. A lot of people that are secularists, they follow atheist pages, Twitter accounts, and for them it seems like we're everywhere. But if you actually do look at the Islamic groups, they are growing much faster than we are.
Yeah. It seems like it's just not PC anymore to promote Western culture. And I think that's terrible. I don't see any problem with promoting it, but it seems that it's not cool anymore.
It's not Western culture. The West doesn't have a monopoly over secularism.
True. Okay, I should say that.
And these ideas have existed even in the Middle East since ancient times. We had scholars and scientists and many people that were always against religion, against dogma, against a centralized authority that determines what people should do and should believe in, pro-skepticism. These things have always been there,
yes.
and just because in some countries you don't hear it as much is because there's a bigger crackdown on it, but these movements do exist there on the ground, and what we have to do. The reason why here in the West we need to support them is not because they don't exist over there; they already exist. But the reason why we need to help them from here is because we here are free to speak, and if they're not, then we should basically lend them our freedom to speak and basically shine a light on their movements because they can't do it. So a lot of people say, oh, you should let them do their own movement and we focus on our own country. Well, they can't. They do need our help sometimes. They do need us to use our platform, use our podcasts, our blogs, our YouTube accounts to give voice to the people that don't have a voice.
That's a good point. Instead of Western culture, what should I call it? Something else? Because you have a good point there. Do you call it secular culture? Or?
Secularism, skepticism, all these ideas of equality. These are all
humanism.
The reason, humanism. All of these these are the reason why it's more dominant in the West is because of the freedom of speech. So. And the reason why we here need to help them is not because they wouldn't help them themselves, it's because they can't.
There's
they don't have that freedom.
Forces against them that disables their movement. That's why we need to help them. And other people think that who are we to tell them how to live their lives? Well, we are fellow Earthlings, right? We are all in the same planet. It doesn't matter if they're in a different country. We all help each other. They think that they have their own culture, their own idea, that we have our own culture. That has never been the case. We have, Eastern ideas has influenced Western ideas. Western ideas have influenced Eastern ideas. Just because their culture and ideas are different doesn't mean that they are not bad. Some cultures could be horrible. Some ideas are horrible, and if an idea in a country is prevalent and it's a bad idea, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't attack it just because it's prevalent in that country, and that's okay. It doesn't make it okay. Based on the same idea, we shouldn't be focusing on the human rights issues in North Korea just because that's we could say that's just their culture. If you commit treason, you get punished 3 generations down.
Yeah.
So, and that's how they live, and that's okay because that's in North Korea.
Yeah, it's obviously not. I don't think most people would argue that that's okay. At least most people that I know. I can't speak for the whole world. I can't speak for everybody. But I think there's a certain helplessness, though.
No one says that about North Korea because it's not a religion, right? But all of a sudden, if the same thing happens in a Muslim country, then it gets more protection because all of a sudden, because it's a religion, it deserves for us to consider that that's just how they live and that's their culture.
Fair enough. Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah,
well, unfortunately we're pretty much out of time.
We are, and we could talk to you all day.
Yeah,
we're
literally
totally on the same page, and I guess so. So no such thing as cultural appropriation. We really think what your mission here is good. You're right. The era of Western values, secular values, are for us all, and I think all 3 of us on this podcast share them. 4 of us for Antonio, the myth of the day. Armin, we really appreciate it. Check out his book, available on Amazon.com, Why There Is No God. Also, check out atheistrepublic.com. It's really good. We really appreciate what you've done, your efforts, and your time today.
No, thank you for having me. That was really fun.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
All right, thank you.
Very good.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. Next week, we're going to be having Jill Michelle Melian, and she worked on Mad TV as an actress, and now she is a filmmaker / director, and she's going to be here. So please tune in for that. I think you'll enjoy it. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. I hope you enjoy us. Okay. Well, thanks so much for listening. We're going to go away now. So have a wonderful whatever time of day it is that you're listening to this. Bye.
The Mythicist Milwaukee Show is brought to you by Mythicist Milwaukee. Producer Sean Frasick, Associate Producer Fritz Blandone, Engineer Jason Lawson, and hosts Brian Edward and Jacob Wolfel. Every week we produce a new broadcast that sheds light on religion, secularism, and mythology. If you enjoy this show, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/mythicist. Closing theme, written and performed by Shelley Siegel.
And who will be the next to die? You know they are all myths. Who will be the next to die? Okay, got it.